Happy Friday, everybody.
Good morning.
This is February 12th,
Nice and
2021. Yeah, and in proper February fashion in Minnesota, this is the coldest it's been for the last couple of weeks. It's going to get down to like 15 to 20 below this weekend, which is nice. And then it'll bounce up to 40 degrees. Everyone's having to deal with cold for their area, it seems like, but
yeah.
This is strangely comforting to me because it's like, okay, here we go, real winter.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's been great actually, as far as I'm concerned.
We understand super cold weather is not pleasant and it hurts the skin, but I mean, I'm not really wanting Minnesota to become a temperate zone. It just spells climate doom. But. But, you know, Biden's turning it around, I guess. Well, I've actually been kind of a little bit impressed. It takes a lot because, you know, he's set out to try to replace all federal vehicles with electric. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
We need a lot more of that kind of thing. And then I'm skeptical about the efficacy of electric vehicles, but he seems intent on doing that. And I hope he does that and more. That'd be great.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, definitely the current administration is light years ahead of where the previous one was.
For sure.
But, and at the same time, you know, so much of it is still kind of growth based, right? Yeah. Which is
still assumes
challenging.
The baked-in toxic logic of capitalism.
Yeah.
And so I want us to move beyond it, but I recognize that's not coming anytime soon.
No.
We need a giant leap, a revolutionary leap. You know, something to stir things up, and apparently pandemic and neo-fascism wasn't it. I worry about what it'll take for us to wake up to reality. If we can do it, but I digress. That's not the topic for this day.
No. So who are you?
Oh, who am I? I go by the name of Mark Van Steenwyk, and I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination. But that's not who I am.
There we go.
Who are you?
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct Micah, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And, you know, we should probably talk about some of the businessy things first.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'll get to minute 32 and we'll be in a panic with 10 comments left to read and we'll be doomed.
Yeah, for sure.
So a couple things. You may have heard the pandemic is over. That seems to be a very strong feeling out there in the world, and
based on wishful thinking more than any science. But yes,
right. Based on wishful thinking and psychological burnout and total meltdown. But I mean, things are definitely changing in some ways, and it's you know, it's been almost a year. Since this all started. And so we're also feeling like things are shifting. You know, our massive viewership has decreased a bit. And, you know, I think people are starting to go back to work more regularly. I'm sure there are some people that are just bored to death of us. But we're feeling a little bit of a change in energy. And so one of the things we're thinking about is how might we refocus this rather than kind of a daily newsy thing, maybe more of a weekly topical thing, and maybe only doing it 3 days a week instead of 5. So 2 things. One is we're going to take next week off to regroup and to think about all that, for us to talk about that.
That's right.
But we'd also really like to hear from all of you. I always feel like the best part of this is all of you guys and the comments and the reflections. And so if there are particular topics that you have in mind, if there are ideas for format that you all have in mind, we would love to hear about that. And you can either put that up today, you can just put that on any of our Facebook pages, the transmission page. You put it as comments later under this episode.
You can message us.
If you want to message us, all kinds of ways to get in touch. And we'd love to hear from you. And then we'll be letting the world know what we're going to do next.
Yeah. I mean, it seems likely that we'll kind of focus more on, because I feel like during the pandemic, part of the thing we've been doing is responding to stuff to kind of like for me personally, psychologically, it's helped me kind of mentally follow the passing of time, because the pandemic kind of thwarted that. So we've been responding to things as it happens. And so we've been kind of a little bit more of a commentary based on what's happening. But it seems like one of the things we're looking at is talking more topically in a way that's slightly more timeless, although still responding to the zeitgeist of what we're living through. So, but we'd love feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for today, we're still following the MO. And today, of course, is Friday. And that means we talk about fascism.
Yes.
As is our custom.
Friday.
Fascism Friday.
And so the way we want to frame this today has to do with a response to the attempted fascist takeover of our government, the January 6th insurrection and all of the activity that surrounded that. And, and I do just have to put out there, as we were saying again the other day, I mean, because I've seen all these people now say, like, well, what could Trump's defense possibly be? What could the defense say? It's like, there's nothing they could say. The notion that this happened independent of him is like so hilarious and ridiculous that it's not even worth talking about, right? I mean, could anybody imagine this happening if Trump had conceded the election on January 6th? I mean, on November 6th? I mean, there's no way this would have happened. So anyway, that's just a whole big joke that's going on. But one of the things that I hear quite a bit from kind of particularly regular folks, often folks who don't live in urban corridors, and that doesn't necessarily mean the countryside, but it could be the suburbs or smaller cities, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Is they say things like, okay, well, the insurrection is bad. Like, they don't defend the insurrection. They say that was bad.
It's like they're a bunch of yahoos just doing the crazy stuff over there.
Right.
That's my rural Minnesotan.
I was going to say, for those who don't know what that accent is, what was that? Strange utterance.
Within probably muddy injection of rural Wisconsinite, because my Minnesotan accent is a little rusty.
Okay.
So that's what that was.
You've been hanging in Wisconsin, so
well, Minneapolis,
more...
we're a melting pot of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and maybe some people from Illinois in here. So it's like throws off the upper Midwestern muddy accent that I was just doing.
Yeah, you betcha.
Woofda. Okay. Anybody just watch the movie Fargo, you can tell what I'm going for. That's what I'm working on right there.
You can tell what you're going through.
Yeah.
Just stay away from the wood chipper.
Now, the funny thing is that's an exaggeration, but growing up in rural Minnesota, there are actually people who would talk like that, although it's getting rarer to have it be that accentuated, but it still exists. It's a thing.
Yeah. Now, that's the thing about those kinds of movies, is that I mean, they're exaggerated, but they're very real.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when we were in Australia and we'd ask about the Crocodile Dundee movies, and you know everybody hates them and is pissed off by them, and then you'd like meet 10 people in a day that were exactly like Crocodile Dundee. You know?
Crikey. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, or you go to Scotland and they hate the Braveheart movie, and then you hang out in Scotland for a little bit, and you're like, for sure, these guys would paint their face blue and go nuts. I mean, so anyway,
That's a
way off
digression, but
topic. Maybe we should read some comments. Got a lot of comments, so already let's read some of them just for fun.
Yeah, Susan says, you know, also ban fracking. That'd be good.
Yeah,
I would love to see that. Viv points out the Biden administration are actually humans as opposed to 45's regime. Watched the video from this morning on C-SPAN with Joe, Jill, dogs and hearts on White House lawn, normality instead of insanity. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. I mean, they're normal people, but our system is not healthy, functional, normal. So my skepticism and frustration isn't with Joe Biden as a human being, because if he were my next door neighbor, it'd probably be a great neighbor.
Yeah.
But our system is kind of flawed, and it gave rise to Trump. And this return to normal isn't a return to, like, doesn't foreclose on the possibility of a return to Trumpian stuff, because to me, capitalist systems, when threatened, will always go in that direction. But I'm glad. I mean, I didn't want 4 more years of Trump. So my skepticism and frustration isn't like, I'm ungrateful. I'm an ungrateful human being who's mad all the time. It's, yes, this is a breather. And if we allow ourselves to go to take a nap because everything's better than it was, we're going to end up back in the same place. And so I want to keep our feet to the fire. Yeah. So there's all sorts of...
And I do have to say that one dog that they've got is way too big.
Well, like, I don't know.
That dog is scary big.
What kind of dog is
one of them? It's like a German Shepherd crossed with an elephant or something. I mean,
that's woolly mammoth, I think.
It is. It's like this weird woolly mammoth.
I haven't kept up
sort of
on
creepy
White House pets, although I know Trump didn't have pets.
No, he didn't have pets. He's too inhuman to have pets.
Yeah. CK writes, "Good morning, smash-its of fascist." Are we the smash-its?
We're the smash-its.
Or are we supposed to be smashers of fascism?
Yeah, but
this very Dr. Seussian, smash-its of
fascism. It is. It's good. I like that. You know, a little cartoon.
Ellen writes,
I will have to point out that 2 of our viewers are saying hi to each other.
That's
so Connie and Lisa know each other from an academy for spiritual formation. So it's great. They get to meet up here.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We like to bring people together in this show.
Before we smash at them.
Stefan writes, if the parable of the wicked husbandman is interpreted socially, where the Lord isn't God but a landlord, then it's a cautionary parable of imprudent revolutionaries. Mm-hmm. You know, thanks for pointing this out, because just for those of you who are really into the Gospels, as I am, Dan is, it's really fascinating to not assume that the most authoritative person in the parable is God, which is an interesting habit of mind. But sometimes they're like just the jerk manager or the jerk boss. So just keep that in mind next time you read a parable and think, what if I don't assume that this king or lord or landlord is God? And it changes the meaning substantially. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and right now I'm teaching a class on the parables and really encouraging people to not treat them as fables, right? Not treat them as little morality tales with answers. Mm-hmm. And you know, Stefan, this is a great example of you kind of opening up the parable in different ways. So it's great.
Kathleen writes, I think 3 days a week would be great. As an introvert, I participate more effectively when I know the topic a day or 2 in advance. I'm especially interested in ways to stay spiritually centered. Thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, great.
Kathy responded with a hearty oofda. For those of you who don't know, because I've actually run into people who've never heard this term, and I'm always surprised because I grew up with it.
Well, I had never heard this term until I got to Northwest Minnesota. I mean, I made it, several decades before I heard it.
It's a Scandinavian exclamation, so it functions as wow or everything from wow to shit. So it's like, wow, like we won the Super Bowl, oofda. Or if you stub your toe, you're like, oofda. It just kind of is this kind of, and it just flows out like, oof. It's got a great quality to it. Everyone
it can mean anything, basically, pretty much.
And if you make a taco with lefse, which is a potato-based flatbread, it's called an oofda taco.
Oofda tacos.
It's a thing.
There's a little food truck that goes around Crookston called Oofda Tacos.
Nice. We're digressing a lot today. It's Friday.
We are. We've lost it completely.
We'll get back to talking about insurrections, I promise. Connie writes, here's a good segue to that. Do you worry about what Trump will do next? We should worry.
We should worry about it.
He has a lot of social power, even if it's not substantial. Like it doesn't take a majority of people in a country to cause problems.
Right. See, and I don't worry so much about him again as an individual. What I find very interesting that we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks is I feel like the consciousness of Trump has like split apart, and we see it metastasizing, right? So now, and it's again, like if you want to go back to the parables, and like this is like the demon legion, there's lots of them, right? So now we've got, Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever her name is. She's like a little baby Trump, and now
Josh Hawley
is like a little baby Trump, and Ron Johnson is like a little baby Trump, and it's the Trump mentality is clearly metastasizing and picking up speed. The guy who's this guy is the head of the Michigan State Senate, is now suddenly acting exactly like Trump. He said that the insurrection was a hoax. He wanted to fist fight the governor. He's sounding exactly like him. And so this mentality is starting to seep out everywhere. It has been seeping out for a while, but now that Trump is quiet, it's like we're seeing it appear in all these other places.
And this is just to take on the Gus role, since he hasn't commented, a podcast that I recommend is called Throughline. It's an NPR podcast, which I'm surprised that I'd recommend it, but it's really good and incisive, and they cover things that are outside of the purview of neoliberalism, which is why I like that. And they have a recent 2-part episode on autocracy. And the second of those talked about how Trump's attempt at autocracy and his way of dominating media, because it used to be dictators would have to seize control of the media in order to shape public imagination. But in our era, all he had to do was dominate the news cycle and social media, which he did effectively, to thereby dominate like our way of perceiving things. And it normalized his mentality. Like the news was put in a bind. You can't not comment on things like injecting bleach and all kinds of crazy, foolish, I should say, because I don't want to, harkening back to our conversation on mental health, really strange things that he would say. They have to report on it because it's the news, and it normalized it all. Mm-hmm. So we're in a point where we have normalized everything Trump has said, and it's emboldened people that think along the same lines. So the idea that somehow now he's not in power, that this will go away, is a strange way of looking at things. Right. We have to worry about what's coming next now that this whole way of seeing things has been normalized enough to have all these politicians.
Right. And we see in this way how systems work, that mind is a dispersed property. It is not an individual property. And so, as soon as these things become normalized, this mode of communication, this style of relating to things, this normalization of lying, all these kinds of things just are like, this is just what we do. It travels around, and people adopt it. So we probably could just do comments today, but I do want to put out there what supposedly was today's topic, which
Get back to it
obviously,
just a little bit.
yeah, just a little bit. So these folks in non-urban areas will say, okay, the uprising was bad. It's bad to break stuff, bad to destroy property, bad to hurt people, and we don't like that. And then they look at a lot of the uprisings related to social justice and George Floyd, and they said, okay, well, that was breaking stuff. We think that's also bad. Why is that not being dealt with in the same way or related to in the same way by people on the left? Mm-hmm. So, and, you know, what I've seen usually as a response to that has been, you know, very dismissive, often very angry and irritated. And I understand a lot of that. I mean, I'm not unsympathetic to that. Mm-hmm. But here's I guess my interest in this, which is that my assumption is that most people operate from a place of pretty low awareness, pretty low understanding of how they've been formed, what motivates them. They have a pretty set, fairly rigid kind of way of viewing life and reality. And at the same time, all people aren't total idiots. And so they, within their way of viewing things, they engage their intelligence. And that oftentimes I find, you know, having spent a lot of my time, for example, pastoring churches where there are a lot of conservative people, I have found that it's actually very effective to engage the understandable or intelligent part of somebody's argument as a way of entering into conversation and real relationship. So, for example, in this issue, I mean, one of the things that I would say is that in some ways, those two actions actually are very similar. In that they come from a place where people, for whatever reasons, have gotten to a point of feeling really frustrated, really angry, scared, mad, distressed at the symbols of power of our society, and they lash out, right? And I think that there are some similarities. But then you have to be able to go a lot deeper into what are the differences. And I think that that's where we kind of fail to do that in a way that's often understandable, right, to people. And I wish we would get better at that.
Well, this gets back to, we've talked about a lot, how particular dominant Christian ways of thinking about ethics and morality mess us up. Because, you know, we can, I can make fun of evangelicals for this, but it's not just an evangelical thing at all. I wish it were. So it'd make it clean. And I could just complain about evangelicals. That'd be nice. But everyone thinks along this line of that discrete acts are in and of themselves morally good or bad. So stealing is wrong. So if you take, and so then it's like a CEO and a hungry person stealing, a CEO who steals the pension fund, and it's a hungry person who steals bread. It's like, I might understand the bread person, but all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You break one law of God, you break them all. Right. This kind of way of thinking, which is prevalent among Christians, filters in like you break a window, you break a window. So then if you bring in a complicating narrative, like what if it's a slave breaking a slave owner's window? Well, still bad. They should have done, like it starts breaking apart. Now, of course, people become afraid because this takes a different kind of ethical logic. And then all of a sudden everything seems like a slippery slope, and they don't want it. They want to live in a nice ordered world where some actions are bad, some are good. And as long as you do the good actions, you're fine and you're a good person. And then the people who do this bad actions are bad people. But that's not reality. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Well, and then though, so if you can enter into that conversation, and you can then say like, okay, so if you're a slave and you're mad and you want your freedom, what would be acceptable ways to get your freedom, right? And one can begin to discuss what are ways to overthrow oppression. And at least at that point, people have admitted that there is oppression, right? Which oftentimes, when they're looking at those individual moral actions, they're not even willing to admit or acknowledge that, oh, maybe there's a problem here.
I've met
right, that people are reacting to.
I've met plenty of people who believe that there's no real oppression in our society,
right,
at all. And if you press them, they're like, well, I sometimes wonder if white men aren't oppressed. Those people exist. Like, those of us who live in urban areas that are progressive, you might think that those people don't exist. There's tons of people think this way. And it's really challenging because then when you have a conversation about, they think burning down the AutoZone on Lake Street is the same as trying to murder politicians in the Capitol. Like, it's just kind of the same to them.
Right. Or at least, within the same realm. Right?
Yeah, it falls in the same part of the spectrum of violent acts that are not acceptable.
Yeah. And so that one of the things I think that to me is very interesting about a lot of these conversations, again, when you can get into them and engage with people about them, is that oftentimes people can eventually resonate with some level of the ways in which society constrains us. And people can begin to get this glimpse or this sense of, oh yeah, this system doesn't work very well, and it works worse for some people than others. And it's just been interesting to me to see over time, again, speaking from my own, very personal anecdotal experience, it's just been very interesting to me to see over time, actually people become much more open and sort of radicalized in certain ways when you can begin to enter into these kinds of conversations. And because I do think that on a certain level, most people can recognize and resonate with the ways in which there is lack of freedom in human society, even if there are very different degrees of that, and they're coming from very different places around that. They can get it at a certain level. All right.
Bunch of comments. We're going to dive in.
Tons of great comments.
Khan asks, and this is responded to Stefan, say more about that parable of the husbandman. So say more about that. Tyler writes, since I primarily work from home, I enjoy the daily discussions for their therapeutic value, but I understand that it's potentially difficult to keep them up daily, week after week, month after month. I can easily adjust to 3 days a week too.
Okay, thank you.
Viv writes, agree, our system sucks. Totally agree, Mark. 100% flawed. We don't need to return to normal, but as it was awful, but just glad to see normalcy on a Friday morning. It is comforting to see,
yes.
And as much as people on the left, like far left where I live, want to villainize everybody who's kind of in power, being in the position of power that's a problem, not always the people. And I do think Biden's probably a fundamentally decent human being who's super flawed. Like that's but largely super flawed in terms of being in power. So I agree. Like seeing someone play with pets on the lawn is it's not a high bar, but it's so comforting compared to what we've been experiencing with.
It is.
Yeah,
and it really tells us how low the bar got. Right. I mean, it really does. Like when you can see somebody playing with a puppy and it feels good. And it's like you realize, and this is the thing about narcissism, and Viv you talk about this all the time. Narcissism is incredibly abusive, and it's exhausting and toxic. And when you're freed from that, you feel a lot better really fast. So for sure.
No, and there's this balancing act. Like I don't want to discourage people from feeling hope and encouragement and refreshment, and even to take a pause and breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
So I don't want to diminish that, but I also don't want us to do the thing where we become complacent, and it's a difficult balancing act. Yeah. So I don't want to like somehow make it seem like it's an easy thing. So take the comforts where we can. Keep working. I know we all kind of are. Everyone listening is probably on that page at some level. Ellen writes, I learned oofda from the VeggieTales song I Love My Lips. Yeah. If not familiar with that song, I'm going to have to look it up. Yep. Adam writes, I'm creeped out by the common responses to critiques of Biden. Quote, we could go back to Drumpf if you'd like. I get the sense of relief that Drumpf is not holding office, but I don't think that means we shouldn't dare complain either, which is what it always sounds like. The cultural working to preserve itself through its self-silencing is staggering. Yep. Kathy writes, or we didn't win the Super Bowl. It still hurts a little. I'm not sure what that's responding.
No, I'm not.
I feel like this podcast, since it's live, is a flowing river, and then by the time the comments float to us, it's like it's further down the river, so you don't know where things entered the river. Con writes, say more, Stefan. About that, yeah. Adam writes, it always looks like Mark is starting the day with an ice cold beer. This isn't a beer. This is actually
that's pumpkin spice soda.
This is Spindrift, which is the best of the sparkling waters because it has little bits of real fruit in it.
And you weren't even paid to say that.
No, I'm hoping though that Spindrift is watching among our tens of viewers and will send me free cases of the stuff because it is kind of nicer than LaCroix. Susan writes, I won't stop worrying about Trump until he's disempowered and in jail for his crimes. That message needs to be seen by his cult following. Con writes, Trump wannabes. And again,
I like this. Lisa's comment.
They are Horcruxes.
Yeah, that's great.
So I'm assuming you're referring to these Trumpites who are basically
within
them Voldemort's evil soul.
Yeah.
We have to basically impale all of them with basilisk fangs in order to to be freed from his villainy. Viv writes, as predicted by mental health experts, 45 severe plus dangerous psychopathology has spread. Dr. Brandon Lee, Yale forensic psychiatrist and a leading violence expert, how Donald Trump's pathology infects the millions who follow him. The violence of the Capitol insurrectionists arises from his mental illness. Unless he's held accountable, we will see duplicates of him. And there's a link there. There's definitely this thing, like once the floodgate is opened and certain things have entered into the mainstream discourse, normalized, seen as even socially acceptable or tolerated, everyone who has those inklings is going to be motivated to go into those deep waters. And it's problematic because Trump was a door that opened up into a whole world of messed up ideology, and moving him from office did not close the door. No. Ellen writes, if the spirit of the Patriot Party is legion, how does an everyday vegan find some pigs to scapegoat off a cliff to get the spirit gone? Jesus for President has a unique in-depth analysis of the Legion story. I mean, I love that story of Jesus casting Legion into the pigs and they go jumping off the cliff. But I recognize we can't really do that. We can't walk up to like a Trump protest and cast the spirit of Trump into some nearby livestock. And those livestock aren't going to run off a cliff. So it does raise the question, what does it mean for us to exercise this sort of spirit of fascism? It's a complicated question. So thanks for raising it. Kathy writes, in what impartial jury can members of the jury say it doesn't matter what the evidence is? We are not going to convict and meet with Trump's lawyers. I'm embarrassed to say Josh Hawley is the senator of my state. He also encouraged people, it's 1-6, I don't know what that means, on January 6th. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They can get away with this.
Yeah. I mean, these aren't impartial jurors, obviously. Yeah.
Lots of comments left.
We're way over time. Yeah.
Just to jump to a few here, just to end. Sorry if you got clipped off. And again, please send us your messages or comments about topic ideas and format, and we welcome them. Gus, I know you're listening out there somewhere, Gus. 2 podcasts I'll recommend. The Ways the Civil War is Important to U.S. Formative Ideas. Season 4 of Seen on Radio and on Civil. We've been fighting some of these same fights over and over for generations. Yeah.
And I don't know if those podcasts talk about it, but the major leaders of the Confederacy that were still alive at the end of the Civil War were never prosecuted or held accountable, and that, in many ways, was part of what set the stage for it just continuing.
Mm-hmm. Con writes, I feel like Black Lives Matter protests are protesting centuries of oppression, and white supremacist nationalists are protesting to keep their power.
Right. Right. And that's the obvious thing about this making these two things the same, right, is that the underlying dynamics and motivations are completely different, right? They're completely opposite. And that's the challenge of, again, of as Mark, you were saying, when you're just looking at behavior as a morality play, which sadly is what, Christianity teaches people to do, right? Sin is about individual bad behavior. If you're just looking at that surface level, it looks the same. Mm-hmm. And so the entry point to the discussion then, though, has to be, if that's the person's worldview, you say, well, yeah, there are similar things, and then what's underneath it, right? And people don't have that level of analysis, of reflection, of understanding. And so helping people to get to that underneath place is, that's a big thing.
And it's not just because they lack the capacity to understand it. Our society really super duper reinforces a kind of an atomized way of seeing things rather than a systemic way of seeing things. And so our society makes it hard for people to see systems for a reason. We're very anti-systemic way of looking at things type culture. And largely
instead of an atomized way of seeing things, it'd be better if we could get them to have an atomized way of seeing things.
Adam says, to be fair, seeing people play with puppies almost always comes with good feelings, unless you're an ardent cat person, I suppose. Susan writes, the problem with those who were outraged by BLM uprisings last summer is they also vote for and support systems that perpetuate the oppression and blocks an ability to change policies and laws in a quote-unquote legitimate way, such as the Senate impeachment conviction or lack thereof now. For sure.
Yeah.
Tyler brings up back to the puppy thing. I would love to see the awkwardness of Trump trying to play with the dog for comedic value.
Yeah, there's all kinds of bad ways that could go.
I'm just
He'd be like, you're being mean to me, dog. You don't like me enough.
Or holding a baby just at arm's length. Like, I don't know if he's ever changed a diaper in his life. And if he did, I want to see it. Oh, Karen writes, Spindrift Sparkling Water. I tagged them for you, Mark.
Woohoo.
Endorsements are going to come my way. I'll be a spokesperson. I mean, I don't like capitalism, but I'll make an exception for Spindrift. Patricia writes, it's the patterns and structures of who and what we have compassion for. What we find understandable is what we tend to forgive or excuse. Here's where racism undermines mercy and justice. For sure. CK writes, I think when we are dealing with the morality of what happened this summer, it is a form of righteous indignation. And what happened on the 6th was propinquity of whiteness without any moral compass. I don't know the word propinquity. I'm wondering if it's a different word you're trying to say, or it's just out of my lexicon. Jumping the last couple comments here because we need to move on. Adam says the source of so many of these issues is how people are socialized and what is normalized. A door open for Trump because of how much our society values celebrity, allows people and institutions to get away with lying, and both sides. Everyone's opinion matters rhetoric, which allows so much untruth to run rampant. It also leads to alternative facts. And of course, the media played into this because sensationalism sells, and so they were willing to comment on the most ridiculous things Trump did, and not really hardly any of the more normal things, in the sense of like mundane things that he did. Propinquity equals proximity. I looked it up.
All right.
Adam. Final word to Adam. Atomization. I would love to see that Drumpf dog thing. One of my favorite bits of footage is him getting snipped by a bald eagle and his reaction at some dumb photo shoot. And we will leave that mental image to everyone.
Mental image in your mind. Thank you, everybody. It's been great hanging out with you.
And we won't be back next week. Yep. We're taking a week off to think about things. Please send us your messages, and then we'll see you the week after. And I hope the next week is amazing somehow for everyone listening.
Yep. And stay warm, stay safe.
Mm-hmm. See you next time.